It's now my distinct honor to introduce to you one of our recipients' most esteemed colleagues at CBS News. Margaret Brennan covers foreign affairs in the U.S. State Department for CBS. She's traveled the world with Secretaries of State Hillary Clinton and John Kerry. She was among the first reporters to interview Secretary Kerry about the Iran nuclear accord. A Connecticut native, Margaret was part of the CBS News team that won the Alfred DuPont Award for coverage of the Newtown tragedy. Before joining CBS, Margaret spent a decade covering the global financial markets, anchoring her own show on Bloomberg TV, and reporting for CNBC. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the stage CBS News foreign correspondent Margaret Brennan.
Thanks to all of you. I love watching that video, and I remember watching that at home, Bob, and feeling very teary-eyed seeing that retirement. But you had, they cut the video clip where you said something about, what did you say? They're asking me for more pizzazz in this stand-up. It was a pretty funny little clip of you. Good evening to all of you. It's wonderful to be here. Bob Schieffer has been a wonderful colleague of mine at CBS, and he has made quite a lasting impression on me and on so many journalists. Many of you sitting here probably expected to see John Dickerson standing up here this evening, as he is Bob's successor on Face the Nation. But I was lucky to be asked because John got a last-minute assignment to interview someone who we really don't hear from too often, Donald Trump. So I was very pleased, though, to step in for him, and I'm sure Bob thought you had seen everything in your 46-year career at CBS News and before that, but I don't think anyone has seen a presidential race like we are looking at right now, and I know we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that ahead. But it is an honor to be here to help award Bob the first Poynter Medal for Lifetime Achievement in Journalism that serves democracy. And the last three words of that sentence, I think, are really the most important. Bob's a journalist in the very true sense. He has treated it as a calling. He recognizes and he respects the responsibility that comes with informing the electorate. And I really do believe that there is a certain form of patriotism wrapped into what he has done. That concept of directly challenging the leaders and the ideas that power this country. Bob's very authentic, and maybe it's that Texas charm, but he has a certain way of asking tough questions that disarm without offending. And he brings the person he's interviewing and the viewer themselves straight to the heart of the matter. I believe that's powered his impressive 24-year streak of moderating Face the Nation, a show he helped make #1 on Sunday. He's interviewed every sitting president since Richard Nixon, and he is one of the very few journalists who have covered all 4 of the major Washington beats: the White House, the Pentagon, Congress, and the State Department. He's in the Television Academy Hall of Fame. He's got 8 Emmys. He was named a living legend by the Library of Congress. And perhaps more impressive, he did all of that with his wonderful wife, Pat, by his side for 48 years of marriage. And this past April, Bob and Pat came to our wedding, and they were among the most popular people there. In fact, I think I have more photos of them than I do of us. My 16-year-old cousin Fiona has a snapshot of her with Bob now as her profile photo on Facebook. She wants to be a journalist, and she asked him for career advice. And Bob told her that one of his very favorite questions to ask is, "Now, what do you mean by that?" And I love that because it is the perfect response to the type of canned talking points that we hear far too often. And it forces the interviewee to kind of back up the big idea that they're touting. I am a graduate of the University of Virginia, which means I'm supposed to be able to quote Thomas Jefferson off the top of my head at the drop of the hat. It's practically a requirement before you graduate. But there is one particular quote that I have in my office that has stood out to me. Thomas Jefferson said that information is the currency of democracy. And I think all of us are richer, and so is our democracy, thanks to Bob. So thank you, Bob. So I think I'm supposed to invite you up here for some award giving now.
Bob, on behalf of the Poynter Institute Board of Trustees, the first Poynter Medal for Lifetime Achievement in Journalism. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Over here. I think Margaret and I are going to sit down and have a little conversation here, but before we do that, I just want to tell you all how honored, truly honored I am to receive this award. This is one of the most meaningful things that's ever happened to me. I have great respect. I've come to Poynter over the years. You do such a wonderful job and such a needed job with the services and the counseling and so forth you provide to journalists many times in mid-career and those from other countries. It is truly wonderful work that you do here. And, you know, I'm the luckiest person ever. When I was a little boy, I wanted to be a reporter. And Walter Cronkite was my hero when I became grown up as a young reporter. And I got to do, as a grown person, what I'd wanted to do as a little boy, and I got to do it working for the guy who had been my hero, Walter Cronkite. So I have had just a wonderful, wonderful life, and I'm truly touched that you all would honor me with this award tonight, and I just want to thank you all very much.
So you look like an Olympian there.
I'm going to wear this. I think it
You
goes
should.
well with a bow tie.
I think it does too.
Very nice.
So we're lucky to get some quick question and answers with Bob, I think, because I know so many of us have missed being able to get his perspective, his commentary on what's been happening out there in the political world that we got so often on Sunday morning. And Bob, I want to start with, since I mentioned him, Donald Trump and the what that says, what he indicates about the political campaign that is underway right now. When you look at the array of candidates out there for the Republican Party, when you look at the fight within the Democratic Party for the nomination, I mean, how does 2016 stack up to all the elections you've covered in your career?
You know, Margaret, I've always said that every election is different. And this, I think, is shaping up as the most different that I can ever recall. I mean, a year ago, if you know, I walked out on this stage and said Donald Trump is going to be leading on the Republican side and somebody named Ben Carson is going to be running second, and on the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton would basically be in trouble. And now there's talk that Joe Biden may get into the race. I think people would have thought I was, you know, had something in the water or something. I don't think any of us anticipated anything like this. Having said that, I have, from the very beginning, and I caused a few raised eyebrows, I think, at first, when I said in the very beginning that I do take Donald Trump seriously. I did then, and I still do now. I think it is conceivable that he could get the Republican nomination. Now, we're a long way from the nominating parties, but I do think it's conceivable, and I think I understand why he is where he is and why this race is where it is. the chickens in American politics have come home to roost. We have been heading toward this for a long, long time now. We have turned what used to be an amateur sport into this enormous industry that has grown up around politics, where it is no longer about running for office as much as it is about raising money. We are seeing people becoming extremely wealthy, all of these consultants and gurus and all of these people. Did you ever stop and think about, when I was a little boy and I was growing up, the first politician I had any knowledge of was Lyndon Johnson. I was 11 years old. It was 1948. Johnson was running for the United States Senate, and we heard that he was coming to the vacant lot where we played baseball on the northwest side of Fort Worth to hold a campaign rally. And it was a big thing in the community. And the reason it was a big thing was we heard he was coming in a helicopter, and none of us had ever seen a helicopter. So my dad took me down to the lot, and my friends' dads took, everybody in the community came down there, and all of a sudden up in the sky, this airplane with no wings and this voice, "This is your candidate for the United States Senate." We didn't know if it was God. We didn't know if it was a politician. I said later to somebody, I think I knew how Moses felt when he realized the burning bush was talking directly to him. And then this helicopter lands in this great, cloud of dust. He gets out, Johnson does, makes this wonderful speech that had a beginning and middle and an end, like politicians used to, kind of speeches they used to make when they had to hold a crowd there. And at the end of this, he took his hat off, threw it into the crowd, waved goodbye, got on his helicopter, and flew away. Now, I can remember every minute of that day, and I was 11 years old. I can remember these campaign commercials from the last campaign. I don't want to remember them. I want to get them off of me. I'm afraid I might catch something, if I, but, in those days, everybody who got Lyndon Johnson to our neighborhood had another job. Some of them worked at the bank, some of them were members of the labor union, some of them worked out at the bomber plant over on the other side of town, and they all had real jobs. All of the things that those people did, we have now outsourced to people who charge us an enormous amount of money to get it done. And that, I think, in a nutshell, is what has happened to our politics and why we are where we are. We have professionalized something that people used to do because they thought it was fun or because they had an interest in it. Of course, there was always money involved. But people were involved in politics because they felt they had a reason to be involved and because they loved it and they wanted to be a part of it. I'll tell you one other little story about that day. I later told this story to Jake Pickle, who was a congressman from Austin who later took LBJ's place in the Congress when he was elected to the Senate. And he said, "Oh, yeah," he said, "my job in that campaign," he said, that was my job. And I said, "What?" He said, "Well, I was the hat catcher." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, Lyndon Johnson was the tightest man on the face of the earth. He said he wasn't going to waste a hat on a political rally. And he said, so he would see me, I would drive to wherever that helicopter was going, I'd get on the front row. When he'd see me, when he took that hat off, he'd throw it to me, then I'd run around behind the helicopter, give it to him, and then they would fly on to the next. But what a contrast that is to the politics of today, where so many times now politicians don't even hold public rallies. They hire some consultant to tell them who lives in the community. The great thing about that was when Lyndon Johnson came to my vacant lot on the north side of Fort Worth, we got to see him, but he also got to see us. Now, every time we have installed these professionals between the candidates and the campaigns, it takes our politics further and further away from the people that they represent. It now costs so much money to get elected. To come to Washington the first time around, a candidate has to sign off with so many interest groups that by the time he gets there, he can no longer compromise on anything. And so the result is we have what we have today, a government that is in total gridlock. Ronald Reagan used to call Washington the shining city on the hill, but the shining city on the hill has become the town where nothing works. Where nothing works. People are disgusted with it, they're fed up with it, they're frustrated with it. And so I think this is the reason we're seeing candidates like Trump come to the fore. Now, I think you're going to have to do more than just hurl insults to get yourself elected president, but so far Trump has done pretty well. And on just that alone, because people are so disgusted with the system. But I think we're coming on, Margaret, a very crucial campaign. We always say this is the most crucial campaign ever, and sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't. This time, I think it is. If we don't find some way to get this government unlocked and get Washington working again, some way, somehow. And I mean this as much of an indictment to Democrats as I do to Republicans. This is something across the board. If we don't get something done here and get this thing rolling again, we cannot remain a superpower. This is not how superpowers conduct their business.
Well, just this week, you had Congressman Peter King saying that people were weeping in the cloakroom, supposedly, when they learned that Kevin McCarthy, who was widely expected to be the next Speaker of the House, and withdrew his name on the day that many expected him to be taking that position. He called it a banana republic when he saw that. White House called it chaos in the Republican Party. And enjoyed a bit of the theater, but then also raised some concerns about what this means for the president's own agenda in this last year in office. Beyond the presidential campaign, when you look at what's happening on Capitol Hill, is there a fix? I mean, how much of a threat is there within the Republican Party to themselves?
I think it's all part of the same thing here. We are not electing the same kinds of people that we used to elect to the Congress. There is so much emphasis now on raising money, on getting enough money together that you don't have a primary opponent, that we have, the talent pool now consists of people who are willing to do that. And the problem is, as we're now seeing in the House, they're just not very good. They're not very good. I don't mean they're bad people. They're just not very good at what they were sent to Washington to do. They're not particularly good politicians. They're not particularly good businessmen. What they're really good at is begging people for money. And they don't know how to do anything else. And so we have what we have happening in the House of Representatives right now. I mean, it's almost like there's a group in the House right now that has rabies or something. I've never seen anything. I've never seen anything like this. And as I watched this thing unfold last week, I was thinking about some of the urban riots we've had in this country in recent years. And, you know, we would see these awful things unfold, and obviously these people had a grievance. But the part I never understood was, why would you burn your own house down in protest? And I think, in a sense, that's what we're seeing. The Republican Party is at war with itself right now, trying to define who it is. And as part of this protest, as you were, they seem to be burning down their own house. I don't know how this is going to shake down. I think there's a lot of heavy pressure now on Paul Ryan, who was all set to be the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, and is certainly the exception to the rule. He is a fine young legislator, and he's a very serious person, and I think they'd be lucky to have him. But you know, he had said flatly he wasn't going to do it. But I think he's getting so much heavy pressure that he might wind up agreeing to do that. But other than that, I have no insight into what's going to happen there. I had been told last week that Kevin McCarthy simply didn't have the votes to get elected. And I don't think it was much more complicated than that. I think he just simply couldn't get the votes together because there's such a divide there. But it's the most remarkable thing I've seen in Washington in a long, long time.
A lot of people also, when they mention Kevin McCarthy, they mention Hillary Clinton. That'd be a little difficult for him to sit through that House hearing when she goes up later this month to testify about these ongoing questions that are plaguing her political campaign in regard to the fatal attack on the diplomatic mission in Benghazi, then her use of private email, all those choices she made. What do you make of this scandal? Is it worth the attention it is getting? Are we asking the right questions? And is she truly in trouble?
Well, I think her campaign is in trouble. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be rescued, but, I mean, when you look back over the last year, she has been in just sort of in a slow decline. And again, it's one of these consultant-driven, high money, all the emphasis on raising the money, and yet keeping the candidate sort of segregated off and closeted off from the people, not holding news conferences, going out and holding these listening tours and all this kind of stuff. People see through all that kind of thing, and they want to see the candidate and find out what she's for. But I think I find her campaign astonishingly inept in some of the things that they have done, for want of a better phrase. I mean, so, you know, the campaign announces that they're going to make Hillary Clinton more human and more real and more personable. And then somebody finds it necessary to say, we've decided to do this because we ran a focus group. Well, what could be more artificial? I mean, if that's what you were going to do, why would you say that? I don't get it. I mean, all I know is that you couldn't take the money out in the backyard and set it afire in bushel baskets and spend more money than they're spending over there. And it is what it is. I mean, so I'm really thinking, and I'm basing this on nothing but just sitting back, you know, and reading the newspaper every day and talking to a few people here and there. I think Biden is going to get into it. I don't know how that's going to go, but I know for a fact, back before his son died, he really wanted to get into it. He was really thinking about, you know, would he have a chance, and you know, talking to all the people about, you know, could he raise the money and so on and so forth. Then his son, I take him absolutely at his word. I mean, his son meant everything to him, and this was a real blow from the family. But I think we'll find out in the next probably week or 10 days if, in fact, he's going to run. And I'm just going to make kind of a horseback guess and say, yes, I think he will. And I people are talking about this could present quite a situation here. People keep talking about a third-party candidate and all that kind of thing. Here's Brother Bernie Sanders over there, who's not even a Democrat. People talk, is Trump going to run as a third-party candidate? Why wouldn't Bernie Sanders, if he didn't get the nomination and getting all the attention he's getting, why wouldn't he say, well, maybe I ought to run? I think we could have 4 candidates. Because, I mean, I know Trump says, well, I'm not going to run as a third-party candidate. If he decides that's what he wants to do, he'll do it. And so I don't discount him as a third-party candidate if he doesn't get the nomination. But I think we could have one of the more unusual general elections that we've ever had, with as many as 2, maybe 4 candidates out there.
I think we have time for just one more question here. But I did want to ask you, the president's out in Oregon today. There was some controversy over whether or not he should have gone to meet with the families of the shooting victims from the latest brutality. Question over whether it's being politicized, whether it should be politicized or not. What do you make of what has become a regular occurrence of this kind of violence and the president deciding that this needs to be political?
Why wouldn't the president want to go out there? I mean, why? I tell you, the one thing that I found stunning is the comments of Ben Carson about this. You know, I would be inclined to ask Ben Carson about medical matters, but I'm not sure I would want to ask him about infantry tactics after what he has just said. It seems to me where he said, you know, that the victims out there of that shooting should have charged the shooter. You know, I thought we found out during World War I that you didn't, you know, send your infantry head-on into a machine gun nest. That just, it seemed to me we figured that out a long, long time ago. And the idea that you would tell people who were facing a gunman, you ought to just charge him, and he couldn't shoot all of you. Well, that shows very little knowledge, I would say, number one, of automatic and semi-automatic weapons. Well, of course you could shoot all of them. So I found that the most, the stunning part of it. But, I mean, we're seeing this campaign, and this is one of the things that I find so interesting about it, Margaret. People are saying things that you just didn't used to say. You know, I mean, saying when Donald Trump said that John McCain was a loser because he got caught, and yet he seems to have ridden that out. Now, whether he can continue to do that, I think will be the test here. I'm beginning to think maybe Trump has sort of topped out at about 25%. Whether he's able to get more, we'll find out as this goes along. But right now, this is just one of the most, I just can't think of another word, but one of the most bizarre political campaigns and presidential campaigns that I've ever known about. And in some kind of ways, it makes me feel like maybe I wish I hadn't retired. I mean, you know, but I did, so. Is that it? Margaret, thank you very much for coming down here. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank you all. And let me just say again, this was a wonderful, wonderful honor. You know, I just have had such a great life. And this is just one more thing that I never had any idea. I just always wanted to be a reporter. I never had an idea I'd get to do what I wanted to, all these things that I got to do. But I still go back to just what I told that young lady when she came up at the book tour, never forget this is fun. And what I always say to students is whatever you choose to do, don't worry too much about the success or what they're going to pay you or all that. If you get good at what you do, that part will take care of itself. But in the meantime, pick out something that you find interesting and fun, and you can make, I think, especially in journalism, real contribution. Because, you know, I will just close with this thought. I don't know where journalism is going right now. It's been, the whole communications world has been turned upside down. But there's one thing that we know, and that is you can't have democracy as we know it unless citizens have independently gathered information that they can compare to the government's version of events and then decide what to do about it. That is as crucial to our way of life and our form of government as the right to vote. I don't know if reporters are going to be... I don't know if reporters are going to be working at websites or at television stations or at newspapers that aren't printed on paper, but we can't have democracy as we know it without a free press, and that's why Poynter is so important, and that's why I'm so proud to be with all of you tonight. Thank you all very much. Thank you.